Right, this is going to be episode 5 of Middle Kingdom Minds. 2-man episode for this one. We're going to get down to the nitty-gritty again before we expand out, bring in the guests. So I actually was thinking, as often you do as the host, like what would be the good topic to start with, right? Because you can go a bunch of different ways. You can either start with, the biggest name team, or you start with something really shocking that happened. But I actually noticed that what's great is a theme of what we discussed heavily in the last episode when we had Frata von Letau on the show was obviously the rise of FPX, Fon plus Phoenix. And what's interesting is this, Raz, is they're still maintained their record. They're still undefeated in terms of series. And on the one hand, that's still great. They're still leading the LPL. But I tell you what, when I saw this series they played against LGD, that could have changed. Obviously we're going to talk about LGD separately, but what would you say FPX is at? Are they the best LPL team at the moment?
Right now,
you have to start having that discussion, right?
You're starting hard, man. Goddamn. All right. I'll say they are the strongest by default, but my worry is that when I go up against teams like RNG and Invictus Gaming, they'll lose it out. Especially since right now, a lot of the teams, like quality of gameplay. If you watch these other teams that just came up, like RNG just had their first series really with Uzi and EDG. When they went up against them, I was like, God damn, they're looking good. And then my major issue with FPX is right now, if you're checking the boxes, team fights, excellent. I love it. Right? They look amazing with it. Coordination, much better. I'd say right now they have the best coordination of the bunch. But then if we're just talking about pure vision control instead of for objectives, that's where my worry comes in. So legitimately, through stats, Duembe right now is amongst the worst control wards placed bot mid laners out there. If you just look at his item slots, it's just legitimately the guy will buy everything and anything other than a control ward. And so control around mid lane is actually really hard for the damn jungler. Tien, a lot of the time, if you see some of the games where it's okay, you pick for 2v2 around mid, sometimes Tien just gets bumped out because they just don't have vision control around bot side. So that's a lot of specifics, but I'm mostly just referring to the fact that I think in terms of current strength, I would say that they're number 2. I think they're the second best team. But in terms of obviously
falling and stuff, yeah.
Yeah. So I'd say right now they're best team fighters. But in terms of the best quality team, I'll give them number 2.
Right, why do you think that is then in terms of that aspect that you say about Duembe not being someone buying a lot of control wards? Because obviously he's someone who is considered to be a very good mind for the game. Obviously he has a very good sense for the identities of his teams. I mean, just spitballing, the first thing I immediately think of when you say that is, to be fair, he has played with a lot of very aggressive junglers. So, the old joke is if you have a really aggressive jungler who invades and ganks, they kind of are just a moving ward in a sense, if you know how to read the map. Why is it then that he's fallen behind in this respect, do you think?
Well, that's a good counter argument because Invictus Gaming, if you look amongst the members as well, they don't buy as many control wards, but their style is catered to the fact that Ning is their control ward. Their style is that literally Ning will look and track the enemy jungler. In a lot of his Kane games, Sejuani games, a lot of the times he just literally, if he can't find the enemy jungler, that's where the problems tend to rise. That's when Rookie tends to get ganked out and picked off early. Regardless of some of the poor games that we've seen from Rookie or seen from Invictus Gaming, their style of play is so perfectly catered around not having wards because all of the lanes are supposed to push out and Ning is supposed to really track the enemy jungler. But that's not the style of FPX. FPX's style a lot of times is to play towards team fighting. So there's going to be a weak side of the map, and there's going to be and the weak side is obviously cube.
Sure.
And then there are times when Jackie Love, as much as sometimes the way the play is not really indicative of it, and LWX, I mean, they're going to be weak side if they pick up the Ezreal Tom catch. And so they play what is much more an ordinary kind of composition style. And the reason why Duembe a lot of times just doesn't buy control wards is simply because, yeah, you're right. Tien does play around mid and through mid, almost basically religiously. Jungle proximity is through the roof around him. But then the issue is, at some point that brother's got to go up to Krugs, right?
Sure.
It's And at some point, like, he has to be able to cater to, and he's doing it a little bit more often towards LWX's lane. So it feels like it's not conditional. It's not like, hey, he's going to bot side more often, I'm going to buy more control wards. It's like, regardless, I'm buying no control wards. And that creates holes in their gameplay when he does get picked off just a little bit, or he just get pressured a little bit. And Tien's job playing through a mid lane eventually gets harder. So towards the style that they play, Invictus Gaming is the exception, but for FPX, it seems like that's just a hole that's happened through Doombee's, not just this year, but entire career. Like, the last time he really purchased a lot of control wards was back in the Chagu Reapers days. So, like, since then, when he's on JD, when he moved to Rogue Warriors, like, his vision control pickups were actually his worst point of view. And if we're just talking about what Rogue Warriors was back, like, last year, they were the team that spiked the earliest. So it reminds me a lot like FPX. They were like top of the charts in the regular season. They were first place in the Western Conference. But then when it came down to playoff performance, they took third place in the spring split that is. And then when it came to the summer and when they did the gauntlet, of course, who overtook them? It was EDG, and eventually, like, a lot of people thought it was going to be, including me, JDG too. Out of the gauntlet run, it was literally JDG, EDG, and Rogue Warriors, and it was legitimately Rogue Warriors, even though they were at the end because they had the most points. No one thought they were going to come out as victors, and I feel like that's the trap that I don't want to put FPX in, because I see the same things I see with Rogue Warriors, where they are all very talented players, save for Mouse, and and so you just, like, if they're just talented players across the board, they still have to be able to continue to push themselves away from that whole scrappy team fighting imagery. Like, they have to be able to get to the point where they can improve to, like, so they can have that one great team, Baron team fight, one great Elder Dragon team fight. And the only thing that's barring you is having complete control over that. And I think that's what Doombie and his previous teams have always ran into. So, like, not only just the vision control thing, but the fact that when they do have wards too, like, the shot calling tends to be to fight away from those wards. So, like, that's all, like, the me looking to the future for FPX and saying, like, these are the issues that they will have soon enough, with teams certainly getting better around them. Because, like, you just gotta wait, like, look at my watch and be like, okay, these are some messy games when they're going up against LGD. And I know that IG's had some messy games, but we all have faith that they'll get better, especially when they play Jackie Love. And then we are already seeing RNG play much better, and obviously they have Uzi in their midst. And EDG, for whatever reason, just played the hell up when they ran up against RNG. So teams are getting better after Chinese New Year's, and I would love to see FPX continue to do the same.
I like when you give the example of, like, obviously Ning on IG, where he's like such a great. No, I'm here. Such a great jungler, obviously, for, like, finding the opposing jungler, and that's, like, part of how they've been able to make that style work with all the lanes. But when you say that, that does make it sound like that classic trope from horror movies, where they're all, like, outside the house and they're trying to, like, find where the murderer is, and then all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, the call's coming from within the house. Because obviously the joke is, if Ning doesn't find the other jungler, then Rookie better watch his ass, because he's definitely in that brush on the mid lane, about to just go straight in as soon as Ning shows on the other side of the map.
There's sometimes where I'm just, like, worried for Rookie. I know Rookie's, like, he's pushing in as Lissandra or something. He's like, all right, he's like looking around. Is anyone here?
Is it safe? Is it safe?
Jamie, you can show yourself now. You're like, this is gonna happen, and it eventually does. And you could tell he's not surprised when he ends up getting ganked.
Okay, so obviously I've led into it there, but the other team, I mean, I know people watching the past episodes like, wow, they actually did have to talk about LGD. We do, because here's the thing. Yes. LGD not only came close to beating FPX, they did beat IG, but as you mentioned, with the caveat that this was a game where Jackie Love, the AD carry of IG, was not playing. So, okay, admittedly, that does change things, but all the same, if you look at a team like IG with the monster talents they have, you would still think they would beat LGD. So how much stock should we put in this? Like, for example, on the LGD side of things, is this actually a sign that there's life in LGD?
Yes, this is a huge shift. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, send all your excuses out there for Invictus Gaming that they weren't taking it seriously. Blah, we didn't have a real AD carry, except West was in the goddamn gauntlet for God's sakes last time around, right? It's not like he's a schmuck around there. He's a legitimate AD carry. And then if we're talking about like them going up against FTX, you have no excuse on that one. That one's just, they almost got him down in 3 games. LGD looks so much smarter on the map. Surprise, surprise. Like going into this split, I came in and I may have ranked LGD as like last place team, but I came in with the caveat that I was like, hey, LGD, this is a huge change bringing in Kandi. Like think of all of the junglers that they had for this organization. Literally
some pretty bad ones.
All of them. Yes, this organization has been littered with bad junglers to like, at the very best, like you could say, junglers with potential. Like I had Amy as a jungler with potential, but the potential was if he had some like great jungle IQ, then the mechanics and being able to pick carries would be great. He's like, hey, you know, the Echo jungle and Lisa jungle would be great if you could like know where you should be on the map for like the full 40 minutes. And that's something I couldn't say. And to be honest, like even that aspect has always been marred by the fact that it's like coordination across the board. You can see like Amy walking down to the bottom lane. It's like, okay, wait 20 seconds. He's going to be there. And then PYL has already started the fight. And I'm like, well, this is garbage. Like this is just consistent garbage. So like my issues with LGD has always been 2 aspects. One has been the jungle and one has been the support. And these are the 2 aspects that they've changed from off season, that they were able to say, hey, you know what? We brought in a new jungler. Our best jungler in history. Literally, LGD has finally invested in a jungler that has experience and has like a resume that has been on world semifinals. Like these. I
mean, they obviously gambled on the fact that, you know, they got him when he was at a low in his career, but obviously, yeah, he was once a very good jungler if you go back like 2 years.
Exactly. I know that recently, like, this is a redemption period for him, for people that don't know, because this guy's been through some drama in his life. Like, this guy is not liked by the community because of what's happened on him and, like, on Weibo. Like, there's a lot of stuff that came out in his personal life. And then in terms of his actual performance on WE when he finally came back, it wasn't all too good. But, like, you know that he can game. You know that he has incredible jungle IQ because when they went to Worlds, when they went to MSI, or when they won spring finals, it was because they played around his performance. It wasn't him like basically being the slave to the lanes. It was like, hey, I am literally, you know, you come to me, I am the leader of the squad. And so it was like CA playing through Kandi. It was top lane playing through Kandi. So like he had a large voice. So the fact that he brought that to LGD suddenly throws a wrench into the whole shot calling miss, right? Who's going to be the shot caller? That's what everyone's trying to figure out. Obviously, it's going to be Kandi because you have a lot of respect for the man. So I was like, of course I expected like shot calling, massive improvement. And that's what you see is literally the team being able to hold their own for the first 15 minutes. Even in this, like all of their losses, to be honest, they were holding their own for a good majority of it, like a good portion of the early game. And then something goes wrong. So like, I love the fact that they are improving. There is actual growth through their jungle. And you'll probably know where I'm going with this because now, like with the one shot caller coming in,
yes, PYL's not there anymore.
Yes, RD comes in for PYL. Now I don't have anything particularly good to say about RD because I think RD is a strong, like he's coming in, he's learning the role. Remember, he changed from an AD carry main to a support main when he was on JD Gaming. So he's more so like learning the role, trying to get comfortable with it. Like he's been spamming it in solo queue, to be fair. So like it's more so like he's just trying to be like he comes in with mechanics, and I think that you can see a noticeable difference in terms of like execution and team fights with him and PYL. But like I could honestly like I don't care that much about the mechanical aspect of it, but more so I just feel like the decision making has been a lot better from the team now that they have Kandi in the mix and RT in the mix, rather than when PYL was coming in through, because I haven't seen PYL put out consistent good performance, like since 2015, 2016. Like since then, it's actually just been like, for me, every year has been the same. I said on broadcast and I said after the season, I was like, look, like not only in individual plays are coming out poorly, but a lot of the times, like just decision-making just isn't there. And usually if a team has bad decision-making, poor shot calling, and it's like, where do you go? Where do you look? And the shot caller, but it only took 2019 for that decision to be made. Otherwise, I understand right now, LGD is on a massive upswing for those two reasons. And if you watch the games, you also notice that Kramer went mad. Kramer was such a sick 80. Like Kramer and Yuki as a carry duo is going to win you games. Like just so the fact that like historical issues from LGD side, they fixed the shot calling and juggle issue. But then in terms of just on the right now, Yuki and Kramer are just that good in game. Honestly, I was expecting them to beat FPX. I was expecting that to happen. I thought in game 3, the momentum from what happened in game 2 would carry over, and it didn't. I'm a fool in the end.
The thing is, like, I can certainly see why at times Kramer's being criticised, because he is like quite an aggressive player, like a high feet player in that sense. But like after watching him when he used to play in the LMS, and obviously when he played in Freaka in LCK, like this is a guy where if you need a carry threat for your team, you can definitely fulfill that, because that's the guy's entire MO. Like he's basically the guy who's like, give me all the gold, put me on the hyper carry, and let me go to work. Which obviously in these games is that perfect when he's on Kaiser, right? He's going to go ham. It's exactly what you want. So okay, what's the actual? Since you set up some of the potential there. What should that actually translate to? Like within this split, can we actually can this team now go and challenge for a playoff spot?
I think as of now it's not possible. Just because playoffs, like 16 teams in the playoff teams right now, I would immediately say, FPX, TOP, IG, Sunning, RNG, JD all have a stake to that name. So I don't think any of those teams get bumped out. And I think if you're just talking about Billy and Sino Dragon, I was like, ooh. That's true. Those two teams could get bumped out, but I would much rather say, that EDG would come into that light rather than LGD. So I think this would be a very tough split for them. I don't think they come into playoffs. Okay. But if we're looking about like summer split, I think summer split they're definitely a playoff team. They really just need to be able to come out and pull up consistent performances specifically, and be able to roll into like what Liza's role is, because Liza is the one player that is seems like a difficult role. They even brought in their sub top laner that came in with Fiora for a little bit earlier on in these weeks. So I was like, okay, I mean, Lies is a team fighter. He comes in, he rotates a little bit more often, isn't talented mechanically. And so that was one of the major issues that I have with them, is that if we're just ranking top lanes, Lies comes out in the bottom of my list. So in terms of just pound for pound talent, they're a team that wants to and needs to cater to mid and bottom lane, because top lane has to be able to play through tanks and be a lot smarter in how he plays on weak side. So to answer your question, I think this team is a really good team, and this split is a really good developmental period for them. I would be shocked if they make it to playoffs.
What was the actual reason given for why Jackie Love didn't play in the game?
They didn't really give a reason. For that point, I think IG as a unit, whenever they find an opportunity to field their sub players, they'll do it. The same. I think it was
possibly just disrespect. Basically, they didn't think it mattered.
I think it was. And Wes has always wanted to be able to find time to play in. So they just thought that was a good time to play. Especially if you think of it from coaching perspective or the team's perspective, there's no real reason for them to lose that game.
No.
And if they're bringing an AD carry and they lose that series, they're not going to come out of it and say it's because we didn't have Jackie Love. Surely, in the back of their minds, they're going to be making that point. But it's if we're losing to a 16th place team just because we swapped our AD carry, there's a lot more behind that. So I can understand that as a reasoning.
Right, obviously we don't need to spend too much time on, because as you say, they've only played one series with Uzi, but RNG is finally, in theory, the real RNG. Obviously now the interesting thing is we've got to see Amazing J at the same time as Uzi. So what do you make of the first steps of the real RNG?
I'm going to really see what I love to see, what I really anticipated, which was Amazing J coming in as a major threat at the same time as Uzi coming in for the team. And I think I expected this, and this is what I was wrong about. A lot of people were probably wrong about this, because when Uzi comes in, you're like, okay, everybody, bottom lane we go, right? Everybody change your style. Shahu, you're not getting that much resources. You can take about a 10%, cut in resources. And it's everyone looks to bottom lane. But that wasn't the case. I think I was really surprised to notice that Uzi just went bottom lane. You could put anyone bottom lane. Resources weren't going through. It was going through Shahu and Karsa. They were playing through mid. and they took their talents eventually and started really honing on jungle, and then eventually came bottom lane. Uzi was like not the major priority that we saw in Worlds, so that must have been like a major adaptation that they made in between. Now, of course, that's what they did last regular season too. They were a flexible team at that point, and they didn't always give Uzi the resources last season as well. But what we saw was like this is a major contender. Once again, like Amazing J is a great team fighter. And then when they went up against Vici Gaming, he had his moment. He picked up Yorick while Vici Gaming were just mindlessly doing Baron. He split pushed them to death. Like that was like he literally just won the game off of his Yorick side push. And so I was like, this is what you want to see off of Amazing J, where he is legitimately anything you give him. He is super flexible. He can play tanks and look for team fighting, or he can play carries on side lanes and just like really be like an X factor for your team. I thought that Amazing J would be better than Let Me come like end of season when he can synergize with the squad, but I'm really already seeing like the major benefits of him in terms of how he plays out his lanes and how the team fights have been coming across. So I think the idea of Let Me being like a really rock solid, reliable team is something you shouldn't like forget. But like Amazing J is already showing some major highs for the squad.
Okay. Right, a team I definitely want to talk about now, because we've talked about them in the past. They are one of the teams that is very well hyped, and for good reason. This split is obviously Top Sports, and they had an interesting matchup because obviously they played off against Jingdong, right, which is another team which, I mean, funny enough, similar kind of range. You know, obviously interesting matchup for someone like Yagao because it's literally it's like you replaced me, I replaced you, like that sort of scenario. So, what do you make of them overall?
Man, for the longest time, because like TOP, I was always holding out for, right? Because they had a pretty easy strength of schedule to begin with. If I look at their strength of schedule right now, let's do it, man. It's like, first, of course, their first series with Invictus Gaming. So like they lost that one, that makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
Then it's V5, OMG, LGD, like when they were still coming back up. Like that's, if you look at those 4 series, like I'm like, okay, 3 of those are a must win. Like
a little bit easy.
Do it.
A few cans there for sure.
But like out of those three teams, they should be able to beat with the greatest of each. In fact, when they went up against OMG, the only reason I still ranked them like really highly was when they went up against OMG. I was like, okay, they should beat them, but I didn't think they would slaughter them. I thought that they slaughtered them like 20-minute victories, straight through mid lane with just like incredible numbers on the Jason Zoe pick. But then went up against JDG, and I was like, okay, this is their first real test. JDG took down Invictus Gaming, right? Like this is a real test for TOP since literally week 1. And you got to see it. I thought in the team fighting aspect of it, Loken was like not only were they playing around Baron objectives incredibly well, like XX setup on the map was strong, but like in terms of just raw team fighting, everyone was looking to Loken because it was a situation where like Loken left JDG to join TOP. And you finally see that JDG's missing them, man. Like he just outright outplayed like Bavoy and Imp. Like they had really poor laning phases, and then Loken's team fighting, they would constantly look to dive him. And like mechanically, you can just you could see the outplays happening repeatedly topside around Baron. Like not only was the setup initially poor because JDG were far behind early on in the game because of like the skirmishes bot side. But when they went up topside for just the dives and contesting Baron, was not looking good for them. So I think it was more of, rather than a bad performance from JDG in particular, I think for JDG, they look back on that and say that they do need to take a harder look at their AD carries. Either really grind in and play Imp more often. I think that's a supposed solution because Imp's team fighting I'm not concerned with. What I am concerned with is Imp is their constant look to fight and lose out in the 2v2. Like that is something that constantly looks to happen. Like at this point, you can make a montage about Lu Mao and Imp and how their 2v2s have gone. But whenever I see Pavoy come in, it's a very calm bottom lane, move into late game team fights, and he's just not he's not positioning nearly as well as I'd want him to. But then, of course, for TOP, I think the weakness that we had for TOP was like if we were to like speculate a weakness would have been perhaps the bottom lane, because like early on in the split they weren't doing so well, and then if we're going into later on in the split, or at least in how the team fights have been going through, you'd say Knight is your major threat, 369 is a major threat, that's a dive threat, and XX has been playing so well, so naturally you say okay, well maybe Loken, but you could already see like based off of that alone, this team is way too strong, because Loken, just based off of this play alone, I know it's a little bit easier because of his dual lane matchup that he had to go up against, but I think he immediately comes into the names like top 5 AD carries of this play. Like I would actually put him above Mystic at this point. And I don't want to say that just because like people are like, oh well, like you're just saying that because WE is a below 500 team. I'm not. I'm pretty fair to that. I think it's because like what you're seeing from Mystic constantly is looking to like he's like really honed in on the Vayne pick, and he's even trying to find ways to accommodate that, and by doing so he's making crucial laning mistakes. That's starting to was earlier on costing some of these games, while Loken has sure been protected early, but like I'm not seeing mechanical misplays from him at all. And even last year when he was on JD, I was saying Loken has a real chance to name himself like top 3, top 4 AD carry, and an AD carry heavy. Like when you're talking about names like Jackie Love, iBoy,
sure, yeah,
Uzi,
it goes
like,
deep in this league.
Exactly. Like major, like these are all names that like instantly I could say like best in the world. Like if you put them in a world stage, like SMLC could come out and be like, if Uzi's not there, he's the best AD carry in the world in that world championship. You could say the same for like Jackie Love if he comes in or something. And I feel like Loken at this point in time, how he was playing on JD last year, I was saying that like his playoff performance needed to come through for him to do that. And I think that he was basically making that name, and already he's doing the same thing here. I think Loken right now is the AD carry to watch for this entire year, because he's topping the KDA, which I don't really care too much for. He's obviously getting a lot of protection on that one, and the team's a little bit too strong. But with his current performance, if he's supposed to be the weak spot for this team is a little bit too much of a threat is the issue.
Well, that leads into a perfect storyline for this team and for RNG, because they obviously play each other next. So
yes, the
question is this: from what you've seen from TOP, like on paper, that's an upset. Obviously, it's not as much because RNG is bringing the new lineup stuff. Do you think that TOP wins this match?
Yeah, I think they do. I think with how close EDG versus RNG was, TOP and RNG should be that much better. I think TOP would be able to take it through just raw laning phase, because I know a lot of people would be surprised with this point where I say like Shahu has been performing incredibly well, but I still rate Knight better than Shahu in laning phase. And then top lane, I don't know, like 369 has been a real laner for me, and like a lot of the benefits that I see from Amazing J is outside of laning phase. So this is a situation where I would say that TOP should consistently come out ahead in pace, like after 15 minutes. Like 15 minutes in the game, TOP should have laning phase leads. And that's something that you can't overstate with like a meta that's really catered towards the early game. With turret playing meaning so much for this team, and XX being on point to keep his lane up, Karsa really has to put up his carry pet. Like he literally as influential as possible early. They don't end up losing too much early. So I think that's going to be a major point. And then when we go into team fights, that's going to be a real game between Loken and Uzi. And I know a lot of, like, I keep saying this because people come in with expectations that it's not about the 80 carries, man. All right. You go into team fights, they just play their linear role like some Final Fantasy 13 shit. And they just wait until how it all resolves itself. Pick up the garbage afterwards, and it's how it's all set up for you. But man, like iBoy and Uzi in the last series we saw were the team fights. Like they literally decided how it was won out. They made some insane plays to coming back. I think that's going to be the same name or the same game around Uzi and Loken this time around. So these are my expectations that I have for this one. I think that it's going to go to all 3 games. It would be a shame if it didn't. It really would be. it would say a little bit. And if it goes to 2, then it's like really close, and that's fair. But I think it will 100% be a back and forth series, especially since both these teams, I think, are the best at playing from behind. Like RNG, you remember them last year from at Worlds, MSI, all that stuff. Well, MSI a little bit more, where they're a team that whenever they find themselves in a goal deficit, they can always take the beneficial team fight around Baron, major objectives to come right back into it. You people remember that one from the KZ series. Happened so repeatedly for them. So like they know which fight to take, how to slow the game down to take that beneficial fight. And then from what we saw from TOP, very lightly, I'll say in the Demacia Cup series that they had, but more specifically the IG series in week 1, you got to see them really understand, like XX in particular was speeding up the pace in the side lanes, being able to pick up the Shy and Duke a little bit more often and to like at least get gold on 369. And then the insane TP plays that 369 had, like even though he's a rookie, has some really good IQ on the map. So I'd say if we ever see RNG or TOP behind in a series, they'll claw themselves right back in. This is going to be like the most ridiculous like back and forth series. That's my take on it, and TOP is going to win.
Sure. Right. Probably when you like I say about the IG result, if you put in the context that like they didn't play Jackie Love, you know, that's not as ridiculous. On paper it looks bad. The big upset has to be the Rogue Warriors result, where Rogue Warriors beat Sunning, and admittedly the first game, Hacker wasn't in the game. He hadn't even played the series before. And then I noticed they did like the emergency, like, get him the fuck in the surf now when they lost the game. Right? Was he supposed to be like injured or something? Was he on the injured list? Why was he not playing in the series before?
I honestly have no clue. That's something I'm going to have to dig into. Because like the fact that we're not seeing Hacker play in these series, I can't even say, like a lot of people will come in. I think maybe people will come in and speculate that maybe like Wei Wei's been coming out better in scrims. I cannot believe that.
It's hard to believe, right?
It's very hard to believe. So I'm not too sure why Hacker is not in. I know initially the discussion around like, hey, maybe like because in the initial post about when Maple was sick, he said that it was contagious, and it was the same series that we saw Hacker like not come in it. Literally, it was like this is a contagious thing, like illness. So I was like, okay, it makes a lot of sense. Hacker's not playing for that reason. I think, but like, well, I'll have to dig into that one. I just found it very odd to not see Hacker play consistent games. So I think that's a major issue where we're not seeing because I think the biggest benefit we saw from this team was jungle mid lane synergy early on. And Maple and Hacker's been the best like pairing that we've seen this team come out with. And then of course SMLZ and Swordart could do their thing. It's just that later on in these team fights, especially now that Zhao Yun has really honed in, just slowed down the weaknesses of that side, top side. Like Jiang Chao would lose out top lane repeatedly. Actually just get slaughtered in the laning phase. And Zhao Yun has not been that fact. And now you're seeing in like team fights, literally Zhang Yuji gets the chance to play the game. And the moment he does, like I think the most amazing play we've seen so far this year was his 1v5 or 2v5 Baron pentakill, where he was able to just like pick him up around the Baron pit. Now, obviously, an amazing play usually comes out with an amazing misplay. So that Baron play, when they're not turning, that's an issue. So I think for a team that's supposed to be really smart about the game, great IQ around Sword Art, these are really weird late game decisions that Suning are making when they have leads on the map. So they made a major misplay around Baron. They lost the series off of it. But like that was still something that people should go back and watch. That like I thought that was pretty slick. I'm sad that was on the non-English broadcasting day. You just missed the greatest shit, man. You literally miss the greatest plays when you're just not watching or not calling it.
Sure.
But yeah, I think that was more of a series where Zhang Wuji is really showing himself. I know it makes me sad. I already said that Loken's coming in, making his name for top 5. But also Zhang Wuji is also coming into that list. On a team that's was and probably still is like looking garbage, their team play and the star power that Zhang Wuji has is something that's winning them games.
Well, the weird thing about the Rogue Warriors lineup is, like you say, like because all the good players basically got stripped from the team, and no one really expects anything from them. Mm-hmm. Like they're actually running a very weird system where like they seem to just swap in players literally every alternate like series. It seems like everyone except their bot lane gets swapped out each alternate game. It appears. Like, do you know any information about this? Like why they do it?
Yeah, they do believe in their 10-man roster and system, and so like bringing in a lot of these players from the LDL. I know that in particular, like scrims do mean a lot for this team. Where Hua Tian, the reason why he got benched for Kong Ming was because of a bad performance that he had on stage, and Kong Min I heard was having a good time, like good performances in scrim. So you make the swap, it makes a lot of sense for them. And then the entire break happens, and then I haven't heard anything of why they'd bring Hua Tian back in, but you have to believe it's because of positive scrim records. And it showed on stage when I think game 2, like he picks himself up an MVP performance on that. I think that it's nice to see him play well. I think the major issue with Hua Tian is like consistency in performance. Like I don't think he's in the same name as the top dogs, and I think that's the major issue that this team has, is that like if you go through a lot of their players, like Kong Ming and Hua Tian, both their mid laners, they round out like the bottom parts of the mid lane pool in the entire league. So swapping them in whenever to put a fire underneath them to get better, I think is the right way to play it. It's always difficult, but the last thing you want is like I would say a bad environment would be putting in a player, playing him throughout the split, even in his bad performances, because I guess the upside is that you have good synergy, but the downside is like there's lacking pressure to improve individually. And what you're seeing is Hua Tian really improve in the short amount of time that he had, because there's always some like a fire underneath him.
Right. Obviously, our match, again, a marquee matchup we have coming up is Sunning against EDG. And the only time we've seen EDG since the break was in the RNG game you described before. We're obviously, facing a massive team. Right. This is kind of an interesting one now, because who wins this matchup for you?
Uh-oh. Okay, so this is a fun one. I think. It's a tough one, and also as a fact, it happens tonight, so you might have the result already come through. And on top of that, here's a good one. The rosters came out, and Clear Love is coming in as on this one.
Jeez. All right. Is there a reason why? I thought he was done for good.
That was a pretty good series that Haro had last time, too. So, like,
sure.
For me, I'm like, I think it's in large part, they're probably giving Clear Love on stage chance to see it, like, because, everything comes through scrims first and foremost. If you have good scrims, and I hear a lot of the times, this was an issue last year as well, like Clear Love was simply having great scrims with the team. Like Clear Love was having amazing scrims, and Haro was not performing just as well. So a lot of the times it's so hard to make the decision and say, okay, which one's actually going to be performing on stage. Haro was the one that performed on stage last year, and I think we're going to finally see. The only reason is simply because like the meta is starting to favor Clear Love a little bit more. Sejuani is a major pickup. Nunu in North America has been a thing, but I don't really expect the Nunu pick to come through here. You're going to see a lot more tank junglers, and the team, I believe, needs I would say they need a clearer voice in facilitating. I think facilitation in the last series that they had versus RNG was a major issue. Not so much the team fight, because like I still think iBoy play out of his mind in that series. Same with Scout, but it was more the setup around the team fight, the execution on the tank in those team fights that really fell through, and that one kind of lies into Haro and Mako in particular. So even though Haro had his moments, I think Haro, there are two sides to him, and I think recently Haro's just not. He hasn't been bad, but he's either been like doing super well throughout the series, or he's very spotty. He'll have great moments, and then he'll have like a few plays where you're like, well, it's a little bit an ink moment like that. That's something that you don't want to see in a really competitive series. So it makes sense that they're putting in Clear Love at least just to see. And I think right now Suning is probably a little weakened because of these recent series hasn't been looking good. That being said, I put all that caveat in there. Raz's real opinion, play Haro, man. Like, I don't understand why you'd put in Clear Love, only because Haro is he's a stronger mechanical player, number one. He is actually really starting to find his place in the team, as in like coordination, actually calling around his plays. I think that there's a lot more confidence in his gameplay is what I'm starting to see this year, especially. So even with the recent performance issues that the team has had, I think the last series is a positive thing. It's like when you saw the last series and the loss, but it's a really, really competitive game. And this was the best you've seen from EDG. So there was a real clear direction forward. You're like, great. Next series, you keep up, you get a win. 100% you get a win. I actually had EDG favored going up against Winning Gaming. But then you change up, obviously, your roster and bring in Clear Love. I don't like that idea at all.
No, I'm with you there, because that's actually, I didn't realise, obviously, Clear Love was come back. But that was the thing I thought, is like, on paper, you're going to have to surely pick EDG, as much as it seems ridiculous.
Yeah.
If you look at the recent form. So here's the real question then, is after that, Sunning plays technically next week against IG. Now, this is a big, big game, obviously, for both teams. So is Sunning ready to actually play IG?
Ooh. I mean, just from the recent performances, I'd say no. I don't think they are. I think IG will play up constantly against the teams that they play up against. Like if they're going up against the EDG, if they're going up against the top name teams, they bring out the full force. They bring out Jackie Love, the Shy, and they just make like Rookie will start to play better on that one. So I would say I have a lot of faith that IG will, as they have in the past, get it together, go up against Suning and slaughter them. I think Suning recently, I hope that they also do the same. There's no, like, you can't look back in history and say, okay, no, against these series and against it. Like, no, this is a new Suning. So I'm just concerned about the whole jungle issues, and I'm concerned about the decision-making that they had versus Rogue Warriors. Usually, when you have, like, that poor of a series up against, like a Rogue Warriors team or something, you can rally the troops, you have a deep discussion, and you usually see the best of that team in the following game. That's why I think up against EDG, that one's the most important series for me to see what Suning's current form is. But I still have a lot of faith that IG will come out ahead.
Ignoring early in the split, where obviously the whole scenario where not every team's like fully locked in before the New Year split, you have the factor that people have so many different players that you've seen they're trying different rosters, etc. Right now that the league is actually going, one of the things that I've found is kind of wild is like, because actually at the moment the top teams, except for FPX, haven't really settled. Like that's why I'm kind of with you. Like FPX is kind of what I call like a placeholder. Like they're there until someone else gets their shit together and just overtakes them. It's not that they're bad. They're just probably shouldn't be the best team in an LPL. So credit to Doinby. He's done a great job again. I could definitely see why he's an MVP candidate. But what you have is you have FPX. Then you have a bunch of teams that all should be really good, like Top, IG, Sunning, RNG. Of course, these teams should all be really good. So, like, the top end, when it all gets going, is going to be really strong. But what's crazy is the amount of parity with the teams below them. If you go, like, teams 6 to even, like, 6 to 12 or something, it's crazy how many of these teams, depending on the matchup, could beat each other. It's really wild how competitive LPL is now. There really aren't those teams generally that you're farming the... Like, LGD was supposed to be a bottom team, but they just obviously won a massive series, so it's so up in the air at the moment, right?
Yeah, it's really crazy. I think, like, a lot of these teams, whenever... I think it's more of a product of, like, franchising, too. I think that one of my greatest fears coming into a franchise model was that, hey, you know, a bottom-tier team, they would just, like, start sacking games, right? That they would be like, we don't care anymore. We're guaranteed for life. See you guys. But what you're seeing really is like teams start to really say, okay, we have time. Like I know from my own personal experience, that's something that I would have benefited as well. Like just saying that, hey, we have like literally just give us a year. And just like give us a split to get things together. LGD has really had time to really just change things up. Snake has had times to change things up. OMG has had times to say, hey, you know what, new top laner. And so, like, all of these squads, and Vici as well, just said, okay, we can actually just dip into developmental players, and we know it's going to make it hard for one split for us. But surprisingly enough, in particular for LGD and Vici Gaming, maybe a little bit for OMG, they came out and had better performance when they took that risk. So, like, I think they came out saying, hey, this is going to be a big risk for us, guys. We're losing Xi'an for, like, for Ale. And they're like, wait a second. Like, that's just good. That just came, our first series was a big push in comparison to what we imagined being like series 6 or series 7 to really like have that consistency, right? Same for, I would say, LGD making such a core like roster swap. Now I know a lot of that they didn't decide. Like their players had left for V5, right? But like the major decision being jungle and support, you're like, we'll keep on to this because at least that's something that we like. It's the devil we know rather than the devil we don't. So a lot of these teams, Vici Gaming in particular, just being able to, and Rogue Warriors, another name, everything is so close now, and they're all improving at a pretty similar rate. So I think that franchising, especially, I would say specifically in the LPL, has been a major plus for me, where teams are really, having the investment to really pick up strong players outside, or just being able to say, okay, we don't have that investment. We're okay with actually taking a risk and going into developmental players. That's a caveat of saying in franchising everywhere else in franchising, it's a locked door, but in the LPL, we actually can still promote teams in like SDGs. So it's a weird franchise model that's like, hey, you can still join the league, but you can't leave the league. Like you can't get kicked out.
Right. One of the results that basically meant almost nothing was when Billy beat Snake, because Snake themselves are now bottom of the entire league. And obviously earlier on, Billy lost to Jingdong.
Yeah.
Right. Is it fair to say that the Billy Gaming team is something of like just a middling team, right? It doesn't look like they have kind of like much of a ceiling.
Yeah, I think my worry is the fact that the ceiling for Billy is a little bit too low. Kuro is a great talent, but you have to build a team around Kuro. And I think Meteor is someone who's reasonably found like is a bit inconsistent. But I think if it's going to be somebody on the team that you need to have a high ceiling for, is Meteor. Because we already know what Jinjiao provides, and he's never going to be like above like top 10 of an AD carry. Like that's my issue, is that like he's a great team fighter, but there's everything around that that's just like mediocrity. And the same goes for the top lane, my God, as well. And I think ADD is the reason why a lot of these games that they've been having surprising wins is because ADD has come out and had like some stellar performances. But like this is not surprising us. Like we saw that in the LCK as well. ADD would have like, he has high variance. He has amazing games. And then equally, you can see in some of the series that he just has like really poor performances that he just gets outmatched. So for BLG, their major issue is that their side lanes just are not as skilled as the rest of this, like the rest of the teams that they're going up against, the rest of the competition. So I would say, I mean, I feel bad for Kuro. I think Kuro is still performing really well. He's in a really tough league, and he needs to have a sidekick. And right now, the sidekick is supposed to potentially be Meteor, and it's taking some time. So right now, they're still in the top 8. I mean, a lot of teams are tied right now, but they're still in top 8. I'm worried because very easily, like EDG can come in and take that spot. Victory 5 can come in and take that spot. Technically, Rogue Warriors now picking up that next win could take that spot. So we'll have to, like, Billy basically has to watch their ass and continue to push up, because I think they're the team most at risk later on in the split to just be wallowing in that issue of like mediocrity, where the drafting is the most important thing, because the skill level is something you recognize that when they go into a game, like Jinjiao will get outmatched by iBoy and Zhang Wuji, and who I've just mentioned, the two teams I've just mentioned that could take over them. That's really my issue.
So a team that we discussed a lot more in some of the past episodes was WE, obviously, because initially they started bizarrely without like all the classic members you'd expect. Now they've generally moved towards the real roster, but interestingly enough, I saw that they did play Magic in the first series, the one they lost to FPX, which, you know, on paper they're supposed to lose that, and then they brought in the sub-jungler after that. Yeah, so what is going on with WE at the moment?
I think they're still finding themselves, right? When they brought in Beishang, it was because Magic did perform particularly well, and their games are getting slow. I also just think that they're struggling to find a win condition, and their win condition at the time has been Mystic, which is correct. If you ask anyone, it's like, yeah, that's the right way to play it out, right? Play through Mystic,
sure.
CA and Mystic, but like zoning in on, like, tunneling in on the Vayne pick is one. And then doing so, and remember, Vayne pick requires, or at least the recognition that your bottom lane is going to be bleeding out a little bit early, requires you to have that old style, or at least that semblance of a 2017, where you're like, okay, play slow, set up wards, trade sides on the map, like all of that good stuff. But then that really is a focus on the facilitator, because the reason why their series have not been performing well as the vision control has been lacking. And then Magic's positioning, especially in game 1 of that series, was disastrous. If you're going to have like something that I noticed, like remember when Vayne went topside and they did like this RNG-esque like lane swap where you have Poe's duoing bottom lane with Missing and Mystic in the solo lane top because like, hey, this is great. And then it immediately turned out poorly because Magic went into tried to trade sides vertically jungle, had a crucial positioning error of like trying to contest for blue buff, ended up dying. You're like, well, there goes that. Mystic gets ganked, gets pressured repeatedly, and like that's it. Then suddenly top lane is not that devastating, and the bottom side can get punished, and like Magic has to go bot side and like completely concede top side to enemy jungler. So I think right now the major weakness for Team WE has been the fact that they don't have a facilitator. They don't have a strong jungler. They have to build them up. And so as a result, their team fighting doesn't really have as much direction. So that's my major issue with Team WE. I think that it's a major loss for them to lose out in Condi and Pepper. And Pepper, that's a big one too. And I don't see them making playoffs. Last time they made playoffs because, or at least they were really close into making playoffs in Summer Split and like made it in spring because they were in the Western Conference. They had the buff of being able to just say, hey, we're going up against the weak side of the LPL. It's an easier battle. We just have to go through what was the old FPX. I'm doing so. Now they're going into a 16-team pack. All of the Eastern Conference team has a say. You're going to have both Sunning and JD coming in as well. Like there is really, unless if WE improves, no chance for them to make playoffs.
So speaking of Pepper, obviously the Victory 5 team that he now plays for is actually one of the teams that hasn't played that many games in the LPL. And as a result, they have like the monster schedule now where they have to play like LGD, then they go and play Jingdong the next week, and then they play RNG the next week as well. So that we're going to now really see what this team's made of because obviously it's such a limited sample size. Like you've talked a bit before, like there's some quality pieces in this team. What are your expectations for this team in sort of the next 2 weeks or so?
Yeah, 2 pieces that I really love. Aside for the junglers, I really love their mid and top lane. Korn and Jinu are stellar because we're really getting to see a chance for them to perform on potentially like a really solid team. Jinu, for his life on LGD, man, like God bless his soul, trying to carry the bunch. He really like is starting. There's a spotlight on him now, and he's really showing to people that having a great player on a poor team doesn't decrease his value. Like a lot of people would say that, hey, Jinu, he either doesn't have a brain when he was on LGD, or we didn't like maybe he's not as good or something because he's not carrying it. Like I never really bought that. So the fact that we finally see Jinu coming in, still playing his Riven picks like Vipers in North America, but like building a composition around that has been really strong. So that being said, like I love Korn and Jinu because their recency has been like on their side. I think they take down LGD in their next series. I think versus JDG, there's a real shot there. I'd say it goes to game 3, and I think there's a good, strong possibility they'll take them down, but I'm slightly favoring JD on that one. And then I'm strongly favoring RNG on the series versus V5. So if I'm just saying where V5's lying, they may have great players, but I'd say like they're an 8th place team, like a team that's like skirting in the middle of the pack, but like middle of the pack for a reason that they have strong players, but they still need to find that like level of coordination in team fights and mid game that initially was lacking from Ben 4 when he was on Billy. And Pepper Pepper has the same issue when he was on previous teams. He's more of a player that has that outward aggression, but in terms of tapering that off and being able to support lanes in slower games has been an issue. So I think they can work on that. I think that's actually a really good goal to play through, but currently like they're winning through strengths of just raw talent alone.
Traditionally, LPL teams don't seem to want to play through top lane. Like, I know at the moment the meta is great for it, but there have been a lot of teams where even when you could play top lane carries, like even if like Smeb in Korea was playing carries, you know, in LPL, you'd go and look, and the teams that were on top were the teams where, you know, it was like Let Me had to play a tank, or whoever, Mouse on EDG fucking won was able to win the league. You know, like there wasn't really a like carry top lane meta in that sense. Why do you think the LPL generally hasn't had like that same strength at that position? Because obviously they had good players at it. It's just that they weren't the teams that were on top.
I think it's because you need an exceptional jungler to also sign off. Because when you think of Snake, you'd say, hey, wait a minute, you have an exceptional jungler and you have like an exceptional top laner that should mean success as well. But I mean, whenever it comes to those exceptional junglers, you need someone that can be exceptional for 40 minutes across the dot and can be patient with what a top laner really needs in a longer game. And I think for SOFM, he is the perfect storm of a jungler who's an exceptional talent, skill, but then not the mind. I think the mind of SOFM past the 20-minute mark does tend to like, or at least the team play, like the shot calling, really goes downhill. And that's been the reason why Snake post 20 minutes have been an issue, but pre 20 minutes have been fantastic.
I mean, he is the jungler where like it's like he either wins you the game or just loses you the game entirely.
Yeah, and so like for me, I'm thinking more of like teams like let's say Smeb and Score, like a great duo. Score is obviously like known as the best jungler of 2018, and he is a type of jungler that can set you up to succeed early with great vision control, get you a gank so you can actually get the early lead, and then if you're trying to split push to victory or at least like set yourself up for an amazing team fight from topside, Smeb will light up the way topside. And if you think about the other teams that have been great top lane carry threats, I'll give you a few examples from the LPL actually. So I'd say, let me go through some of the teams that had the potential in doing so. Because I would go as far as to say that this split, let's go through some of these teams, because I think one right now I'd say TOP. So TOP is a team that like they have a great mid lane talent, so that's actually going to be something that you have too many options like to pick from. But very realistically, XX and 369 could just, they have been a top lane duo for like the first 3 weeks, and you could see them actually play through top lane and be patient with that and win through top lane. And I think that's something that the LPL is kind of lacked, because when they finally had the talent, the best junglers were almost never paired with the best top laners. That the best and most patient junglers in the time, let's just say if in 2015, if Ray had stayed on EDG, and if he'd stay on EDG alongside what was the best jungler being Clear Love, I think they would have been great. In fact, one of their series that they had when I went up against Snake in that period of time, that was the best game I've ever like seen from EDG. Obviously, Snake was wallowing in some of those instances. And it may have been 2016 if my memory faults me, but like that was a moment where we got to see Clear Love with a top lane carry, and Clear Love being able to like give him the support that he needed and be like, all right, you can go now. Because there's always in our history in top laners, you can always say he can play carries, but not against the best players in the world. But it's like, no, well then he can't. Like that's the whole discussion. It's like, is he willing to play it in serious modes, in serious games? And so like I think that's been an issue we've had up until this split, where now we have an abundance of great top laners and abundance of junglers who are patient, who can play through it. This is a team that can do that. But my issue is now that the two junglers that alongside Jinnu, and I think this is one of my major issues with the team, are not as patient as the junglers that I've mentioned, and are great minds for the game that can allow you to play your type of style.
Right, a matchup I wanted to ask about, because we touched on EDG when we talked about the teams that played them, but they are going to play against Jingdong basically in about a week from now. And this is a matchup again where, you know, you look where they are on the table. These are teams around similar kind of level. Who do you favor in that matchup?
So which two teams in particular again?
EDG and Jingdong. Play on Saturday, the 2nd of March.
Yeah. I'll say EDG. I'm really high on EDG. I think EDG is just looking really good from just like as a team perspective. Because iBoy coming out, I already said that like 3 times, but like he is individually, like I'm not surprised when he plays well. I'm surprised that once again, Scout, Haro, and in particular, I think Ray playing through tanks now again, starting to understand that his team fight role once again, like that he had in Gauntlet. I'd say EDG just because I think they're a more complete team.